Testing. Thank you.
Oh, that's on.
Mhm. Wait, your turn is on, and then when you're not. So are you asking me to start first? Sorry, I'm
well-
like, okay.
So I will be the timekeeper, as they said, and I'll be flashing up. So you have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. My name is Monica Clark, and I'm here to speak for my compassionate conservative friend, Katie Whittington, who I'm sure you've heard is homesick with bronchitis, a sinus infection. She's got influenza, a high fever, and she's squeaking. She can't talk at all. But it's an honor to let this audience know about Katie and her ideals for the state of Iowa. Katie has lived in Iowa her whole life. She's lived in Clinton for 10 years, where she's raising her 4 children with her son, Frank. It's because of her love for Iowa that she is opposed to the CO2 pipelines, as well as eminent domain abuse for large corporations. Katie has, she's also for common sense in education. She believes parents should have freedom of choice in the children's schools, and she knows our kids also need to have their innocence protected from indoctrination and other abuses. Katie has heard from so many employers and economic development folks in Clinton County and citizens about how important 4-lane Highway 30 is. Tom Dedham has worked so hard on that, and it's been a priority for our community for decades, and it will be a priority for Katie too in the Iowa Senate. Good roads and other infrastructure are a part of a pro-growth agenda, and they create new career opportunities and improve the quality of life in our area. And here's a quote from Katie. I don't pretend to be an expert about road use taxes and how those funds are prioritized, but I do know this. Only one candidate in this race will be a part of the majority in the Iowa Senate and have any hope of getting this road done, and that candidate is me. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on her behalf. Again, she apologizes for not being able to be here in person to speak for herself. Katie is the candidate who will fight for us, stand up for us, and support the policies that are going to help our communities grow and thrive. She cares about Iowa, our families, our friends, our neighbors, and would be honored to have your vote on January 28th. I'm used to voting in November, so that slipped in there. Thank you very much. Am I free to go?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mike, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Mike Zimmer, Democratic Iowa House Senate 35, Senate candidate. And again, I'd like to thank the DCDC and the Grow Iowa, John, yourself, and Rich for taking time this evening to host these. I know that I found them very informative over in Comanche when you did the same thing with our candidates before the November election. So again, thank you very much. And I want to congratulate Katie for receiving her party's nomination. To step forward is a big deal. Both of us are new to this, and it is a lot of work. And it's been a short period of time, and we're trying to cram in a whole campaign of normally 6 to 7 months and 6 to 7 weeks here. So again, just wanted to say thank you to her and to her family, because it's a big commitment. It is a very big commitment. So that's all I have.
Well, again, thank you for being here tonight. First question is, what do you feel are the greatest challenges facing our state and the legislature? And how do you propose to address those challenges?
Well, I've been asked why I have gotten into this race, and I am just going to say that to me, it's been a death by 1,000 cuts. And I say that because in 2017, when the legislature passed the basically gutting collective bargaining, taking those rights away, and then the Senate president commented about how those are just archaic. And I was reminded that when the Fair Labor Act was passed in 1938, it wasn't archaic, that we started limiting or defining how many hours a week a person should work, what their benefits should be, just a whole array of working wages and that stuff. So it has been a series of legislative decisions that I'm just completely disagree with, and it has gone on from everything from there, from transferring public dollars to private schools with no accountability, and that has just been a continuation. And I know that we are in the super minority, but I also know that there are many, many legislative pieces in which we can agree upon. And my goal heading out there is to look at what the Republicans' agenda is, work where I can with them, shoulder to shoulder. And then where it's not, with professionalism and courtesy, bring up some questions about, have you thought about the unintended consequences of this? Have you thought about that? Because as a longtime school administrator, it was my responsibility to implement the laws that were passed. Whether I agreed or disagreed, it didn't matter. It was my goal to implement those at the school level. So anything that was education related. And sometimes I would scratch my head and go, I don't think you thought about this enough. So
Thank you. Can you explain your passions, skill set, and experience that will allow you to represent the needs of Clinton County and Des Moines?
Mike, before you stop, point of order, Angie. Angie, are we doing 3 minutes or 2 minutes on the questions? Okay. Sorry, Mike.
no, I'll keep an eye on it. So
No, you did fine.
for those that do not know, I have devoted 40 years of, well, actually now 42 years of my life to serving the citizens and parents and students of Iowa in public education. And I started as an industrial technology teacher and taught for 19 years at both East Central and Miles and here in Central DeWitt. And then I moved into administration and served as the high school principal at North Scott and high school principal at Pleasant Valley, and then finished my career as a director of secondary education with Pleasant Valley Community School District. Also, during the years that I was teaching to help make ends meet, I established Mike Zimmer Construction. And so I would hire 2 students that I would have at Central DeWitt that would work with me. And we'd put a foundation in the ground. And as soon as I was done coaching track and my contract was up, we would start putting the superstructure up. So I am somewhat familiar with at least a sole proprietorship and what it takes to establish an employee identification number, to pay unemployment taxes, all of that kind of stuff. So I'm at least aware of that. And so I believe that that background, at least compared to anybody else, I have worked with the legislation that has been passed, and I have implemented that as much as I could with fidelity, and see an opportunity to maybe impact that legislation a little bit more with a different voice.
Thank you.
Mike, can you move your
Sure.
microphone a little closer?
Hey, can you just test it before you answer the next one? Like just yell at it?
Hey, hey, are we on? It's still, is that close enough? Yeah, it's green. Okay,
Okay.
I like it, yeah.
okay.
I like the example of the yellow. We weren't sure what that would be.
There is growing concern regarding the cost and quality of education in the country as well as in the state of Iowa. What suggestions do you have to stabilize or reduce costs of education, but increase the quality of education?
So this is something that I don't believe that Iowans truly appreciate. Iowa has one of the most equitable school funding formulas in the country. And I don't believe we appreciate that. When I taught and trained teachers in Michigan and Illinois, that was the first time I experienced the term millage rates. And I was like, wow. And all of education was based on property tax or millage rates. And that was a time when I experienced one side up in Detroit, one side of the road, those students were based on the absolute bare minimum of state funding. And those students received $5,000 a student. Right across on the other side of the road was the world headquarters of Chrysler. Those students that lived in that district received $14,000 a student. And the disparity between the educational opportunities, depending upon which side of that street you lived on, were just atrocious. In Iowa, we established and addressed that early in the 60s and passed the current funding formula in 1971. And it has been modified to adjust for property taxes multiple times since then. I do believe that because there is a concentrated growth in Iowa in about 6 or 7 counties, the property tax equity needs to be addressed again. And we need to look at that formula again, but adjust it within that framework of equity for all students and parents in Iowa. It should not matter where a student and parent lives in Iowa. Those students should have the same right and services and access to education. We need to continue to keep modifying and looking at how to make that equal. So that is my background on that.
Thank you. A large amount of District 35 is agricultural. In your opinion, what has been done to support agriculture and farmers in the state? And how will you continue to work with farmers in this district and in the state?
Well, there's two things to take a look at, and there's two passions. One, economic development is the engine for our communities. Right now, Clinton is in what it would be referred to as a property poor district. Jackson County, a little bit more. Scott County, where the growth is occurring, when you take a look at the Amazon plant, Sterilite, the relocation of Kraft, the new technology center or AI building that's going in down there. It's a completely different story in that area. But here, we need to do two things. One, protect farm ground. And I'm very passionate about that. But at the same time, we've got to have facilities and plants going up. So it's a constant balance in taking a look at how to do those two things. It was mentioned earlier that Grow Clinton, or I should say the Corn Belt, and I didn't even know that the Mississippi had a highway number to it, M35, is continuing to make sure that that port is able to transport our soybeans and our corn to the markets where they need to go. So that's a first and foremost. We need to get the rail system to get the commodities over there, and then those commodities need to be able to get down the river to the ports to be exported. The other thing to be taking a look at is how we're expanding markets for our commodities. I applaud Governor Reynolds for making the trip over to India. I'm hoping that that is fruitful and that we open up some more markets, because we had a couple markets closed when we start talking about tariffs. That's a two-way street. So if we're going to put tariffs on commodities of others coming in, they're going to turn right around. They're going to slap tariffs on our commodities, and they hurt our farmers. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Thank you, Mike. Iowa, like many states, is suffering from a mental health crisis. Recently, the mental health program was reorganized, reducing the mental health districts from 32 to 7 districts. Do you feel that this is enough to solve the mental health crisis? If not, what will you do to address the mental health crisis in Iowa?
Mental health is a very difficult thing. It is tough to manage for each county, but when mental health is based upon property tax, now all of a sudden we're right back to property rich and property poor counties. The only reason that I believe the state should be intervening on that is if their goal is to take the property tax money, so to speak, or that income, and then redistribute it equally, so that, again, no matter where a person lives in this state, they have access, equal access to mental health therapists. As of right now, I'm not sure that this grandiose experiment, how it's going to play out. It is still manifesting itself in front of our eyes. I do know that our Clinton County supervisors and our Jackson County supervisors, and I have not visited with Scott yet, are not happy with how the ability to provide those services is being redistributed back to the counties right now. I know that the governor is aware of this and is trying to address a Health and Human Services Department to make sure that we're getting that. But it also comes back to telehealth. There's a lot of ability to offer telehealth, for whether it's seeing a doctor or whether it's a mental health therapist. But people forget that's only available if people have access to high-speed internet. If you do not have access to high-speed internet, the telehealth portion of it doesn't work. So that means, are we taking a look at establishing hotspots for our families that don't have that ability? Are we subsidizing that so that they can access that service if that's the route we're going to go? And I say that because we ran into that issue during the COVID time when we had kids at home and we were trying to provide educational services, and we had a number of families that did not have the internet. We assume too much.
Thank you. Sticking in a health mode, for 2 years in a row, Iowa has ranked second in the nation for new cancer cases. A 2024 study confirms 12% of Iowa private wells have nitrate levels that exceed the maximum contaminant levels as established by the EPA. Share your specific ideas on steps that you would champion to help bring nitrate levels across Iowa closer to that EPA standard of 10 milligrams per liter.
Well, not only is Iowa number 2 in cancer rates, but they're number 1 in the acceleration of how fast it is growing, which is really, really disconcerting. This is a conversation, again, that comes back to water quality and working with our farmers very closely about anhydrous application and also how we're handling feedlots, especially large concentrations, self-contained units, whether they're hogs or cattle. What are we doing with that waste? And it is a huge issue. I do know that we're making some progress, the planting of cover crops. I'm trying to continue to learn more on where farmers are at with that. Some I talk to are like, yes, you know what, it's $30 to $40 an acre. I get nothing in return for that. You're just asking me to do this out of the goodness of my heart. And I'm like, no, we shouldn't be doing that. But then on the other hand, and I say, should the state of Iowa be subsidizing to some point the per acre cost of that? And then there's some reluctance on that. So I'm a little unclear where we need to be moving on that. I just know that it needs to be done. And we're approaching it very slowly. I do know that in conversations with Norland, he wants that to become economically viable, where we're talking about soil health. But how long this is going to take to roll out, we're going at a snail's pace at this. So again, on the hog confinement and cattle, where we're going with that waste, I know that we're pumping it 1 to 2 to 3 miles in pipelines, just laying across the field, trying to get it over to one section into a honey wagon and then knifing that into the ground. So it's an issue. Everybody's trying to figure out what to do with it.
How do you plan to support and stimulate economic growth in the more rural or economically challenged areas of the state? And what role does 4-lane for Highway 30 have in your formula?
The evidence is very clear. You put a 4-lane, whether it's a highway or an interstate that goes by a community, all of a sudden businesses look at that as a major artery to say, let's take a look at whether we can afford to build there, because now I can get my product in and I can get my product out. If we do not do something to address this 4-lane between Lisbon and DeWitt, I have no idea why this is taking so long, especially when I drive from Lisbon to Boone on a 4-lane and we're moving through and I'm looking at both sides of the road and I'm seeing businesses popping up all along the way. In addition, if a family wants to live in Mechanicsville, they want to live in Wheatland, they want to live in Clarence, all of a sudden, if I can take a half mile and jump onto that 4-lane and get to my place of business in DeWitt, or if I'm going to Cedar Rapids, or if I'm going to Clinton, I'm more than likely to say, I'm going to stay in that community because maybe it has affordable housing. I like the small closeness of it. I like the fact that I have a community there. But if we do not do something to change this, if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to keep getting exactly what we're getting. And it is not developing right now. But that's also going to bring me into 2 hypocritical pieces. If I'm going to say I am not going to demand eminent domain on the pipeline, of which I agree with, but then we both know that if we're going to put this 4-lane in, we're going to run across people that are not going to want to have that come in, no matter what we try to do in negotiation. So now are we going to say we're going to implement eminent domain at that point in time? Those are the hard decisions that are going to be facing us. And I know it comes across as hypocrisy, but it's taking a look at what's good for everybody.
As a senator, what would your priorities and or ideas to meet our ever increasing demand for electricity? What role do you see the state playing in providing guidance or legislation to counties and municipalities to help them answer the legal questions surrounding ordinances related to energy development?
That is a great question in which I am going to be very honest. I think the state has dropped the ball. We have got 99 counties with county supervisors that are not experts in any of these areas. And 99 people are having to do a tremendous amount of research in areas that they have no expertise in. The state should have come back and provided guidance saying, if your community looks like, tastes like, and smells like this would be an ordinance you would want to look at. Whether it's a high population area, it would be a different ordinance. If the population is more dispersed, that might be an ordinance to look at. But right now, they're left to having to do this research all on their own, and it is a travesty. With that said, we need to have an energy portfolio that includes a number of things because not any one way of producing electricity is the answer. It's bits and pieces and all of it. With that said, I want to thank Jim Irwin. I read in the DeWitt Observer, he does his homework. And what he did on the solar panels, while people might not have agreed with it, what came out with an ordinance, the supervisors listened, they put the ordinances in. They did not dictate to a landowner that you could or couldn't do this. They said, we're going to respect the suggestions brought up, and they put it in. By the way, the farm ground hasn't disappeared. You can still farm underneath those solar panels in a different way. The wind turbines are a whole nother story. I am for wind energy with what I'm used to seeing. When I drive on Interstate 35 and I'm looking over in the horizon, I see 400-foot wind turbines. They're working fine. Okay, it's great. There's a large distance in between communities with those. When I was at the Lowmore Parade and I asked Jim Irwin, I said, what's the deal with all these yellow signs coming up on Know the Facts? He said, Mike, these monsters are 600 feet. I had to step back. Oh, 600 feet. I can't even envision that. I'm trying to look at cell towers, and I know how big that is, and it's way bigger than that. Then I go online and I look at the footings and foundations that it takes to put one of these monsters in, and I'm like, okay, we need to take a pause and think about this. And so that's where I'm at with that. Is it caused me to stop. And by the way, I did go online at the time. I looked at what the highest wind turbine in the country was. At that time, it was 575 feet, and this is above that. There was no, if you can't see it, it's hard to put your arms around it. And I will applaud the group that was kind of against this because they had a little model that they were going at the parades, and they were kind of showing the scale of these things. And I would say I want to thank that group for bringing that to attention because I think it could have gone through and people would not have had any idea. So.
Thank you. There's talk about further consolidation of a variety of services and or agencies. What is your position on consolidation within the state government?
Well, this is a big experiment. The governor is wanting to reduce government services, and I'm not going to say we all want to see if there's a way we can implement efficiencies while at the same time providing fairness and equity to all Iowans. I will say that it's been an adjustment for me with the Department of Ed. I have lost a lot of people that I had relationships at the DE that are no longer there. And the folks that are now left, I'm trying to reestablish in my job working for the AA, new relationships with it. And then because I've been there so long, not in the AA, but in education so long, I'm kind of helping those folks learn their job. Say, hey, just want to let you know, this is kind of the history behind where this has arrived. It's an experiment. I want to see how it goes. And I'm just going to kind of leave it at that point. I do say this, that the Iowa Estimating Revenue Committee is put out that for fiscal year 25, I think, Tom, we're looking at less than over $600 million less in revenue coming in. Okay. And I don't know if we're cutting services fast enough to meet that. I will say that I'm a little concerned that right now the state of Iowa is sitting on $6.75 billion in taxpayer relief fund. They're in different areas, but it all totals up to that. I know that the legislature is going to be watching how the revenue's coming in, and if the services aren't cut fast enough, then we're going to have to go to savings to pull that over to cover those expenses. And I've done enough math on this that if your budget model or economic model is constantly borrowing from savings to cover the services, that's not sustainable. So we'll see how this economic experiment is going to go. I don't know.
It's a fair answer. Sticking with that theme, taxes often define our forums and our coffees. There's debate about what the state does and its impact on county and local governments. There's debate on income and property and sales tax. What would your main focus be for the tax structure of the state, or your preference for the tax structure for the state?
When I view something like taxes, it should be a tax policy that's right-sized. And I hope everybody kind of realizes that flat taxes are regressive taxes. So a flat tax means it's the same amount no matter what your ability is to pay that. So if I'm earning $40,000 a year and my property tax is a flat rate, I might have it a little more difficult to pay that. Our license fee are flat taxes. It's just, this is the amount that it's on. The only progressive tax that we had in our policy was income tax. And it was rate based upon the more you earn, the better ability that you have to pay that. We're going to see how a flat 3.8% income tax is going to go, because somebody earning $40,000 paying that amount, it hurts the pocketbook a lot more than somebody making $100,000 or $200,000. You don't have to go far to see other states that have flat taxes. Louisiana is lauding the fact that they have 3% flat tax on income and they have a 5% sales tax. And we're going to see how that, I mean, if you want to live in Louisiana and get the services they have, then live in Louisiana. We live in Iowa. We've had a very fair, I believe, tax policy based upon flat, regressive, and progressive taxes to address that. I think we've gone in the wrong direction on this economic experiment. And I know that the legislature is going to watch this each year. I just hope that you're always looking a year in arrears, and that before you can make a change, that already that train's left and now all of a sudden you're in big trouble.
Sticking on the tax theme, if it was up to you solely, what would you like to see done with the state's increasing budget surplus?
Well, the state's increasing budget surplus was, in my view and what I've looked at, we were using our influx of COVID dollars, however you want to say that came, and we got a lot of COVID dollars, and we started using COVID dollars to pay for normal things that we would be paying for with our taxes. And we started banking those dollars, which I would say those were one-time funds. We are implementing policies based upon the receipt of one-time funds, and we're going to use ongoing expenses. What do I say that is? The flat tax is an ongoing expense that we're going to have to backfill from that taxpayer relief fund. So as of right now, had we had what I would say a right-sized tax policy of property sales and income tax, that money should be going back to the citizens of Iowa. That's what it should be going back to. That's not going to happen. I think what's going to happen is we're going to watch how services are being provided, and when we don't have the revenue to cover them and we've cut and cut and cut as much as we can, we're going to be going there to mask that, and then we're going to see how this is going to play out.
So I'm going in a completely different direction. I'm wondering if there's some bittersweet emotions that go through your mind from time to time. If you receive the majority of the votes and are elected to the position, that means stepping down from the DeWitt School Board. Mixed emotions. What are your thoughts on the possibility of that happening?
I am very glad you asked that, because there was a letter to the editor. I think it was Gary Crone or something, and asked that. And I will tell you that the voters of the Clinton Community School District, I was honored to receive that, to step forward. And that is first and foremost is to the citizens of the school district. And we have gone through some rough decisions last year. We're looking at having to cut $1.7 million from the budget this year, and that's based on a 2.5% student supplemental aid. If the legislature comes back with something less than that, we're going to be cutting a lot deeper than that, because we have got to get our finances back in order. So my answer is, when I thought about this, was approached to run for this seat, my first conversation was with my family and my wife, the kids, saying, if we go into this route, just take a look at, it was a rough and tumble this last election with just all kinds of crazy attacks and stuff like that. That is not something I'm interested in, but that was something that they needed to be prepared for. And then the next thing I did was I called the current directors, Angela, I called Dan Smicker, called Roger Hill. At that time, Jeff had stepped down. Jared was just coming on. And I said, hey, I'm thinking about this and kind of give me an idea where you think you're at. And every one of them said, you know what, Mike, with your knowledge of school funding, what you could do for us out at the state, while we hate to lose you, they gave me a encouragement to move forward with that. But I'll just say this, regardless of this election, I believe wherever I land, that's where I'm supposed to be. So
Thank you for answering that. If elected, what do you hope to accomplish in your first term?
I am very realistic about this. I want to look at what the Republicans' plan is. What are they looking at? And I will look at those, analyze it, and go, yes, this is the best for all Iowans. This is what's best. With working with Tom on the other side or Norland on the other side. What do you have on the House side? What could I help advocate with my colleagues on the Senate side? And this is something we need to work together on. And as I said earlier, if there are policies and things coming forward that I disagree with, I will certainly express those. And one thing, no one out there in the legislature has all the answers. I will tell you this. I was thankful for Tate Huckstead because he sent some really good questions that he wanted answered. And I tried to research and answer those questions the best I could in the Observer and the Macokota paper. And then the Clinton Herald sent over a series of questions. They were good questions. And I tried to do my research and look at those and answer those as thoroughly as I could. And if I don't have an answer, it's about relationships. And relationships are picking the phone up about who you know that's impacted on those areas and asking, hey, this is what's being talked about at the legislature. Give me some feedback. What are things I should be asking about? What are some pitfalls that if we go this route, what are some of the unintended consequences that are going to happen about this that we're not even thinking about? And whether it's the healthcare, whether it's the carbon pipeline, whatever the issue is, none of us are experts in those areas, but you need to know who to pick up the phone and call. And for me, it's the residents of Jackson, Clinton, and Scott County. That's who I'm serving, and that's who I need to be talking to.
Thank you, Mike. Does anybody have any questions that they would like? I got one and we read it. Are there any other?
So Mike is gracious enough to take some Q and A's. Basically a little bit of housekeeping, clear and concise questions. Rich, if you don't mind still doing timekeeping on the questions, just so we can keep them moving as they go. And all of that. And so does anybody have a question? Roger, I know you sent something in, a few questions in to us today. If you want to ask one of those questions, feel free. You can stand up and she'll bring you a microphone.
So if you can stand up and say your name and where you live, county full address. Let's know your town.
Oh, hi, Roger Hill. I live in Eden Township. I have a Comanche address, Fillmore Telephone, DeWitt School District. So there you go. But I'm learning a lot being on the school board, and I really appreciate Mr. Zimmer very much. And I wish I need a definition. I would like to know your definition, Mike. We talk about school choice, and I want to know about the public money. Where does the public money go, and should it stay within the school district? That's, in my opinion, it should. And I know my grandchildren live in the South, and that's why they're homeschooled, as you talked about. And when I graduated from high school, we were number one in the state in the country in education. And I think we've slipped a bit. We have a lot of wonderful resources, and I think we can do much better. And anyway, I just kind of your thoughts about public tax money going to private school.
So I have been serving our homeschool parents for over 2 decades. And I did that as a high school principal, especially at the secondary level, for comprehensive private instruction, competent private instruction. I would be looking at what curriculum the students were going to be receiving at home and then signing off on that. And I know that's government, big brother looking over. But again, I would look at what students in the public school were getting. I would look at what curriculum they were using and say, yeah, your kid should be getting the same thing. That's great. And then I would also follow up with saying, Are there things at your home that you're struggling providing that you think you want to send your student back to the public school with? It might be a calculus class, or, as the students started moving up in grade level, that curriculum gets a lot harder for somebody at home to be providing. I always viewed it as, you know what? It is your right. If you don't want to have your student using the English language arts curriculum, you don't want them reading those books and you want to address that, that's great. You can do that at home. If you want to come back, I looked at it as kind of a cafeteria plan. You can kind of pick and choose where you want the public schools, where you don't, but I'm here. We're here to support you. I completely disagreed when the state said that wasn't good enough and they did independent private instruction, because then there was no accountability and there remains no accountability. What happened was, when I was trying to pursue students that were not attending school, and we were getting the truancy officer, our juvenile court liaison officer, and we were making home visits, those parents that were smart on this, they would just pull out the IPI card and say, nope, that's what we're doing with our kids, and you have no right to even be at our door. We'll take care of our own business. I want the government out. I don't think that's what the legislature had in mind, because when they wrote that, there was a group of parents that were very genuine about it, but they didn't even think about, when you write a law, it applies to everybody, no matter what their intentions are, good, bad, or indifferent. Now, when it comes to this next step on the vouchers or the educational savings account, no, I do not think that should be happening, for a couple of reasons. One, there is no accountability for how those dollars are being spent. None. Rob Sands, the auditor, can't see what's going on with those funds. The local school district, they're completely out of it. And there's not a school board that holds the headmaster or whatever the person is that's taking a look at that. And the other thing, and I don't want to say that schools will look at this, private schools or charter schools, but here's the issue. Their funding is based upon student enrollment. And so they can pick and choose who they want to accept and who they don't want to accept. And when your official count day is October 1, and all of a sudden you get past that and those dollars are transferred, and all of a sudden a school district might say, you know what, I don't think your behaviors and stuff kind of fit what our mold is. Back to the public schools they go. Where does the money go? Stays right with that, right where that kid was going. So I think we are treading on some very, very uneasy, especially when they talk about Iowa values. And Iowa values, this state prided itself that all students in this state have a high quality public education. And I think we're going in a path that maybe our southern states, whatever that reason is they want to do that, I kind of have its history behind that, is pretty ugly, but I do not think we're going in the right direction.
Thank you. Dave Rose is gonna, that's all his hands, so.
Yep.
Right, stand up and introduce yourself, and Angie's got a mic for you.
One thing lately, that I'm seeing are the data centers that are coming. And we'll probably get a data center which takes a huge amount of electricity. And there's something going around that maybe we could put smaller units in to fund the data center, and they create about 50 jobs. And so it's a huge use of our electricity in the grid, and we don't have enough electricity to take care of that. So I'd like to have your comment on that. And it's good for us because the 50 jobs are high tech and very important, but the consumption of electricity is huge.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, because that was an area that I really had no knowledge of until I was listening to a segment out in Nebraska where they had one of these centers in, and they were talking about how much electricity and coolant and water that they had to pull for these units. And I had no idea. So one of these data centers is scheduled to go in right off of the I-80 corridor down around the Love truck stop, somewhere in that area. And it's, I don't know, it's over 700,000 square feet. And if there's 50 jobs in there, I think that's a little more. I thought they were talking like 15 jobs. But your point is the amount of electricity that these units are going to require, I don't think that can be pulled the way the grid is right now. And so I don't know if we're going to be talking about them being able to put a windmill in there, and they're going to try and supplement it with that to backfill in if it's going to be solar panels, if it's going to be a mini nuclear facility. I mean, there's all kinds of concepts out there because these units, it's just incredible how much electricity they take and the heat that's produced. So yes, I love AI. I go on Chat GPT. My wife is always going on, you know how much electricity you're using when you ask that question. I said, yeah, but man, it comes out, it's pretty fast. I love what it's producing. So it's one of these where I love the output without knowing what the input is in to create those things. So that's a great question that our county supervisor and our state are going to have to be taking a look at. How are we going to upgrade our power grid to support these thinking processes?
In the very back in Iowa State hoodie. And then you and there was you. Yeah. ILLINI.
George Pickup. I live in Delmer in the district. First of all, I applaud Mr. Zimmer for all his research. Quite impressive. But the thing, education is near and dear to both of us. We taught together. We've been principals. I was a principal here for 17 years. My big concern, I'm now retired, but the shortage of teachers, industrial tech, for example, Spanish, upper level math. But now it's not just that. It's every curricular area. You used to get 200 applicants for an elementary teacher. What do you think needs to be done to keep teachers in this great state? Because if we want to get back to what Mr. Hill said, being top 2 or 3 or number 1 in the state, how do we keep good teachers and how do we make sure that our schools are educating them in today's education world? Because it's not the same as it used to be, Mr. Zimmer, as you know. So how do we attract teachers? But more importantly, how do we keep them after 2 years? And how do we keep them here forever? Because it is a great profession.
It is a great profession, and it's one that I went into because of the economic times of the late 70s and early 80s with the farm crisis. My plan was to farm, and that was not going to happen. Then I thought, well, I want to manage the Payless Cashway on Brady Street. Well, that's an RV dealership now. So when I went up to UNI, I went into construction management. Then I shifted over to industrial tech teaching. I thought, well, I'll come out and get a job in that. And there were 8 of us from UNI, and we were going to the same jobs interviewing. And it was the last man standing. And so I say that because George sets the tone. When I started in administration, if we had an elementary position open, we had 400 applicants for that position. Phys ed, oh my God, I'd have 100. Social studies teachers, I have 100 that applicants I would go through. It is jaw dropping when we post for an opening. And when the Department of Ed, each year they would have the high demand areas, teaching professions, and it was industrial tech, science teachers, math teachers. Every single Board of Educational licensure is now a hard to fill position. So I have been working with the Teacher Preparation Registered Apprenticeship. It's called, we all have acronyms, TPRA. And I set that up when I was at Pleasant Valley. We were in a consortium with Davenport, and they had gotten a $3 million grant. And so we had opened it up to all school districts in the area, how many teachers. And what we were doing is trying to recruit paraeducators that were already in the classroom to see if they would be interested in going into the profession. And so that's been helpful. The problem is paraeducators are in special education classrooms. And so that's where all of a sudden we're starting to pull and get teachers for recruitment as out of special education. It's much more difficult. You don't have a paraeducator in an art room or science room or something like that. So I know that the legislature and the governor is trying really hard to, what I would say, lower the teacher qualifications. I feel like we're going back to the Iowa State Teachers College where we had 2-year degrees. That is not the direction we need to be going. What is happening, 2 of my daughters are instructional coaches, which means at the high school, and they're working with teachers that are coming out of industry, welding teachers or whatever. And all of a sudden, that old adage that, well, those that can do and those that can't teach, well, they're finding out real fast that, oh, classroom management, oh, I have to do a lesson plan. Oh, I've got to teach safety to more than just myself. I've got to do it to a class of 27. Oh my God, this grand experiment is not working. They're walking in there And if I can get them to stay from one day to the next to the week and just get from a week to a semester, that's great. Davenport just lost a home building construction teacher. They did call me and say, hey, would you be willing to come back? I said, I would, but I'm not going to be able to do that right now. I've got other irons in the fire. So the bottom line is paying teachers a wage that is reflective of the education that they've invested in. That's a huge piece. And why would anybody want to invest $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 into a 4-year degree to come out and they were earning $40,000 and taking them forever to get up there? I applaud the governor getting the $50,000 wage in and then the $62,000 for 12. But here's the thing they didn't ask. They didn't turn around and ask, hey, by the way, should you be covering counselors? What about your nurses? We have other people on the salary schedule that we've put on there that have degrees and they've been treated the same way as teachers. They didn't think to ask about that. The other thing they didn't ask about when they ran the numbers to find out how much this was going to cost, when I would hire a teacher, I would give them teaching experience from Iowa or from Ohio or Minnesota or wherever we were at, but we would not record that into the system that we were giving them their credit. So when they got hired, the clock started ticking as an employee in Iowa without thinking about, oh, guess what? That person is farther on the salary schedule than you think. And had they thought to ask about that, we could have worked through and said, okay, can we get those numbers in there? Because then what we ended up doing, we ended up with an unfunded mandate to the tune of about $90,000, at least at DeWitt, because we didn't receive the teacher supplemental pay to cover those hours, or years experience. So
The man here in the green vest is next.
Jim Richmond, DeWitt Township. The matter of energy sources was raised. And I think the Department of Energy, the U.S. Department of Energy, has already addressed a lot of that for us. And they've done a thorough research on the efficiency of the different sources. Nuclear is rated at 92.6% effective. Solar is 26.1. Wind is 37. The U.S. Department of Energy has also said that one nuclear plant will replace 3.125 million solar panels. Makes you wonder why we fool around with either one of them. Additionally, the Iowa State Code, I think it is chapter 358, on the county zoning commissions. That particular code section makes wind and solar panels illegal in Iowa. The code says in number 1 section, it says that county board of supervisors, if they elect to go under that code section to create a zoning commission, it exempts farms. And then the 3rd section says, excepting for agricultural property, the county zoning board will have certain designated powers. And one of the powers under that subsection 3 is that they're allowed to create districts. And they're obligated to create an A1 prime agricultural district to put the exempt property in. Well, I'd like to know, why would the state ever want to endorse those and pursue them? And I would suggest that if you're in the Congress there, would you be willing to kind of look at those kind of things and maybe take a different path?
Well, if I were running for Congress, I would look at that. This is at the state level. But to your point, those of you that have been around, you know the negativity that nuclear power got. All I have to say is 3 Mile Island, and all of a sudden we have panic on that. We also have no one to blame but ourselves that we didn't come up with a common footprint of what a nuclear power plant should look like. Instead, we have multiple different designs out there. Byron, Illinois has one with the towers on it, cooling it. The French have one design, I believe, that they have repeated over and over and over again. It works, it's safe. We just have not taken a look at saying, okay, how are we going to come back? And when it takes 20 years from the inception of even a concept of a nuclear to the time that you actually get it online, that's way too long. So I'm not disagreeing with anything. I think I'm actually kind of looking forward to the revisiting of the production of nuclear energy, but we're at a spot now where people's fears are in a completely different place than they were 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years ago to kind of revisit that. We still have to talk about the waste. What are we going to do with that? So you're on, I'm not disagreeing with that, but we're just not there at that spot with nuclear yet.
Well, there's a lot of regulation dispensed with too, but, and this isn't a federal thing. I'm talking about the practice in Iowa. And I'm saying it's illegal and it should be revisited, and I'd like to see any representatives that get to a state level there to explore that. Would you be willing to explore that?
I'm always willing to explore and listen to anything.
I would like to talk to you. Fully about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we probably have like 3 more questions and then we might just, so I know you, and then who wants to be the last one? There's Hampton. And then that'll be around 7 o'clock. And then, you know, I think, I won't speak for Mike, but I'm sure he's not in a hurry to leave. So we have.
Go easy on me, Steve.
Yeah.
I'm Steve Thayer. My wife and I live in DeWitt here. I'm a little bit shocked we haven't talked about mental health issues in this state yet tonight. The state of Iowa is last in the nation in mental health beds per capita. And they're very near the bottom on psychiatrists, mental health doctors, mental health workers. I think it's embarrassing for the state. So Mike, what can our legislature do to improve those numbers and really help the people out there that need that?
Well, I think it starts with encouraging students coming through our secondary system to actually take a look at, is this a field or an area that you might want to go into? I do know that trying to address this, and I'm going to deal with this at the secondary level, it was atrocious. If I had parents that were crying and we're trying to address a potential suicide issue, and my only recourse when it got that bad is I'd have to be the second adult in the state of Iowa. You need 2 adults to sign off on it to get an involuntary committal. So I'd be down at the Scott County Courthouse. I'd have mom or dad or whatever. they'd be one because usually just one parent. I'd be the second one signed. And then we would get that assigned to the civil division for the county sheriff's department. And they would get the child and take them over. At that time, it's still that way, to North. And I knew that I had 48 hours. That's all I had, because that's as long as the insurance would cover it. And I'm just telling you, that's what is still in play right now. What we did do is, I hate to say this, but we ended up recruiting the mental health therapists from Vera French and Bethany to the schools. And so what would happen is those mental health therapists would go out on their own and create their own, like, sole proprietorship. And then what we were doing is using Title III funds at the school to establish a base wage. And then we're using Scott County DCAT to help fund that. And basically what we were doing, I feel like it was like sales. The mental health therapist had a base wage of $16,000. And then the rest of their compensation was based on health insurance. And that's, you know, if it was pay to play. And so if the family had health insurance, the kid would get those services. If the family didn't and they were on Medicaid, SSA, then all of a sudden those individuals, they could not afford to accept that student on because the compensation wasn't enough. And if the mental health therapist was with Bethany or Vera French, their organization was large enough that they could absorb the less money for that, and so they could serve them. But Steve, I'm not answering, I'm just saying that I'm reinforcing, yes, I've been dealing with that at the school level. And I applauded when, I'm going to get this wrong, I think it was Eagle Ridge or something down in Bettendorf came in, and they were offering 75 beds and they were bringing the therapist with it. What was appalling was our local hospitals fighting them. And I was like, what in the world are you doing? And I was like, well, you're going to take this. I said, we need to be working together, not fighting an agency that's bringing therapists with us. So, yeah, we got a lot of work to do on that. One thing I would say that for those that are on Medicaid, that the state revisit what that compensation is so that people that are on that can get access, and that mental health across the physicians or whatever will take those folks on and still be able to make a living. So.
Thank you.
Terry Keegan. I live about 2 blocks from here. We all know we live in a highly partisan age and environment, and you'll be going, if you're successful with this, as the freshman member of the super minority in a highly partisan environment. You say you're willing to work across the aisle, but it's just far too often we actually see that reflected in the vote count on so many issues. Can you give me a couple of examples where you're willing to go on record as saying of Republican priorities you're willing to support, and also maybe a couple of examples of Democratic priorities you're willing to buck?
Well, on the Republican side, I haven't seen what the agenda is. I've listened to Tom and Norland. They just are talking about property tax cut. I'm like, okay, I'm still trying to see where that balance is at. And I do know that if we just talk about price for a moment, this is what's happening on the state side of it, where we can come to some agreement on the state funding formula. That's one that I know we need to address. And what has happened is that when you're in a property poor district like this, you're at a school board, you're going to pass your levy rate. It's going to be whatever, say $11 per $1,000 assessed valuation. Well, then what you're looking at is how many $1,000 increments do you have in the county to spread that out? And when you don't have a lot to spread it out, or farmers are the ones having to bear that burden, that's the part that's not fair. And that's where we can step back and say, well, let's look at the funding formula, because we got those property rich districts. Okay, maybe we need to have the per pupil portion raise up and less on property taxes, and the state is willing to pick that up. Maybe that's what they're going to use as part of $6.75 billion. Let's use that to reinforce the per pupil expenditure, because that's the equalization piece. I don't know what the other priorities are. I have to listen to Tom and Norland, they're my reps out there, of what we're looking at. I did not catch the governor's talk, so and nothing jumped out on the paper about it's this, that, or the next thing. So on the Democratic side, I would say that yes, trying to address childcare, that is a huge issue. As a matter of fact, childcare expenses, if you're talking about a single child and you're doing $800 a month, $200 a week, 4 weeks, $800 for one child, that's going to be pretty close to approaching what your mortgage payment is. 2 kids in there, you're underwater. Now all of a sudden the 2 kids is more than your mortgage rate. And so I look at improving Iowans' quality of life in here is that, yes, income is one area, but if you're keeping a budget, expenses is another area. So you can approach this quality of life from 2 different vantage points. What are your expenditures and what is your income? And we got to get somewhere balance in there. But childcare it's huge. The other piece on the childcare is that for too long, those providing childcare, those are the ones getting dumped on at $10 an hour, $11 an hour. Like, okay, now wait a minute. So you want to go to work and you want somebody else to watch your kids, and then you just want to underpay them. That's not a way to work this out. So they need to be paid a fair wage, a livable wage, those people that are doing the childcare. And then on the flip side of it, if we're paying $15 an hour or $20 an hour, do the math. A work year is 2,080 hours. Take that times 20. You're still talking about $41,000. And then you've got $2,000 or $1,500 a month childcare payment. Put the house payment on that. You're fighting for your life to even keep your head above financial water. So those are areas that I think we can work together on.
Because we got Ragbri and then Hampton, so.
Oh, Ragbri.
Yeah.
Oh,
Dick Snowy with I'm a board member with Iowa Bicycle Coalition. Tuesday night, we received an endorsement from Governor Reynolds for the distracted driving. So where do you stand on the hands-free?
yes. Again, as a bicyclist, and I do the route up to Charlotte and over to and down. Absolutely. So, when you're driving behind somebody and the speed's going up and down and they're going over to the left, then they're going over to the right, they're not paying attention, they're texting. I'm just amazed that we don't have more accidents that we do now. So Tom, that's ridiculous. So no, put the dang phone away, pay attention to the road.
Okay, our
Yeah.
last audience question is the young lady in the Hampton sweater. I should let everybody know that I'm the president of the Riverbend Bicycle Club and I do not know how to ride a bike. Open there.
Too much information.
Okay.
I'm Kathy Hall and I'm from Scott County. I want to bring up the pipeline issue, the CO2 pipeline issue. It's going through my property. If Wolf reapplies, they have it, but Summit is gun ho on doing what they're doing in the western part of the state. And my concern is the amount of water that they want to take from our aquifers on a yearly basis. It is billions of gallons, and they want to take it from I should back up. Each ethanol plant will use 1 billion gallons of water a year, and they want to take it from the lowest aquifer. What will that do with our water supply? We're in a drought area half the time, especially the western part. My concern is, will you be looking into all the dangerous issues that these pipelines are going to be creating for no reason at all? They're not really going to be taking the amount of CO2 out of the atmosphere that they say they are. So I think a lot of research needs to be done on your part, and I hope you're willing to do that. And the last question is, my train of thought. Oh, eminent domain. Summit and Wolf are private companies. Your road system is a public issue. There is a difference. And I would like you to keep that in mind too. Thank you.
I'm glad you asked that question, and I'm sorry I kind of set you up for that so that you knew the difference between if a legislature says we're going to do eminent domain on a public project and we're not going to do eminent domain on a private. I know that if our farmers do not have a market for their product, we are a corn and soybean state. That is a major economic driver here. Make no mistake about that. If we don't have a market for that, whether you agree or disagree on using food sources to produce energy, I got a whole nother conversation, but let's just talk about the pipeline. As far as I'm concerned, if we can hold that off and give this new experiment that's going on in Western Iowa right now, I listened to an interview on Iowa Public Radio. I'm going to give a plug for them, where they were interviewing a geologist that has secured an $11 million grant, and they are drilling a 5,000 or 5,500 foot deep well over in Council Bluffs in Mid-America, has an ethanol plant over there. And what they're looking at is why are we doing a pipeline all the way across to Iowa, all the way down to Southern Illinois? Why are we doing that? And this is another one where sometimes we don't stop and ask the question, what are we trying to solve? And what are the different options to solve that? I had no idea that Iowa has no deep wells. And the first thing I thought about was, oh my God, what are they going to be doing to the aquifers? I didn't know, for example, that our deepest aquifer or well is at 1,500 feet. All of our wells are somewhere between 1,500 to 100 feet deep. These are 5,000 or 5,500 feet deep. What are they looking for? They're looking for shale or limestone or something that's porous that we could pump the carbon dioxide or CO2 down that well, and it would just stay right on the property of the ethanol plant. And that would mitigate the whole reason of having to have a pipeline go across any place. It would just stay there. So to me, at this time next year, we should be getting the results back from what this core samples look like and what do we have under Iowa in a deep well? Because we don't know. I had no idea that we didn't know that because we are not a oil producing state. We don't have any deep wells. They're pumping them down to Illinois and Indiana because they have oil production and they have deep wells, and that's what we're heading towards. So that's just kind of my observation on that, that if we can keep the ethanol plants, that's not addressing the water issue. If we can keep them by the rivers, maybe we're pulling it out of there instead of our aquifers. That would be an example. We're still producing ethanol. Maybe it's just not pulling out of our aquifers, which you're absolutely right. They're not endless in what's down there. So.
Okay, well, I'm always a sucker for one more if Rich has one. Thank you for being a timekeeper. So, or you can just say, let's wrap it up.
I'd say let's wrap
That's
it up.
good. Yep. So turn it over to Angie.
One of the things about having just one candidate here tonight is Mike had the pressure the whole time. And so we appreciate that and thank you for your frankness.
Yep.
So at the risk of making us all applaud again, I did tell Mike when we were organizing this event that he would have an opportunity for closing statements. So I don't know if you want to take that opportunity.
I would only say this. Regardless of whatever commercials or anything else that comes out, yes, I'm running as a Democrat. My values align a little bit more. I will tell you that if Jim Leach or Robert Ray were running, I would be over in that category. So I'm a Jim Leach, Robert Ray Republican, and I swing over this way. The bottom line is I'm not the devil. So now you've got to meet or talk and at least hear an exchange. So anyway, I do appreciate that. And I just thank all of you for, we always avoid conversations about religion and politics, and very rarely do we get an opportunity to just talk in a cordial way about our vision for Iowa, what we'd like to see happen for this, because we live in a great state. I am proud to be an Iowan. We have a rich history in this state. And I will say, I'll put a plug in for my website, but I have been running every single day a different Iowa value that goes all the way back to before Iowa was a state, that in 1835, when this country believed that women were property, the territory of Iowa allowed women to own property. We were the first state to allow women into post-secondary education in the University of Iowa. We were the first state 100 years before the Civil Rights Act. We were the first state to desegregate public education. We have so much to be thankful for in this state. And I think that the legislature passed and said, we want the students of Iowa to learn about Iowa history. I took them up on that. I said, well, here's Iowa's history. And so again, I have to remind myself sometimes when it's getting a little down about why I continue to live here and am proud to be here. So we've got a lot to be proud of.
A second round of applause, I said we'd have to do, sorry. I do want to just thank all of you for being here again. 7 people, we had dozens on and off throughout when we were broadcasting this live. We will post this to the Joint Chamber and Development Company Facebook page. It will be on the Grow Clinton Facebook page. It will be uploaded to the Grow Clinton County YouTube page. And it's also currently being broadcast. I don't know if it'll end up being posted on the Clinton County page as well, but this recording that you see up here will be posted as well. So that people can view that at a later date if they'd like. I'll put another plug in because I get up early on Saturday mornings and not make the cookies, but buy them at Randy's. For legislative coffee events, I truly value the fact that we have such great relationships with our elected officials and they truly want to hear from all of you. So Representative Mumpson, Representative Detterman, and whoever our future senator candidate will be, we will have those monthly legislative coffees where you have an opportunity, much like the second part of this conversation, you get to ask the question and you get to hear from all three of them, which is really interesting because they each have their own strengths of interest and they work really well together. So they kind of bounce back and forth. So, you know, obviously you have the House and the Senate side, but I've always enjoyed hearing from them and learning about what's going on in Des Moines. So I'm going to wrap it up this evening. Mike will stay until probably about 7:45 at the latest. If he wants to leave earlier than that, he can, but I'm giving you guys a deadline.
That's very nice of you.
That my daughter's going back to college tomorrow morning, so I want to be home by 8 o'clock so I can like cuddle for a little bit before she goes back to school. So thank you again so much for being here.
It's on my calendar. I had it at 5, so it's fine. I think
I think I'm by 6:15. Okay, yes. Yeah. Yep, so I'm your new president. Because they were, next, side. Yeah. Yep, March 29th. Yep. Ready.
I'll let you know.
Yeah, I ran a tricycle.
The other thing is that everybody's been.
Legislative coffees aren't. Correct.
I know, I like.
Ours are usually, and it sounds like the red. And I guess people come in for Scott County. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Multiple, so like Norman said, we got who was and then she had mentioned that a Saturday. And the reason I really went there is I was talking to her, even Tuesday night, she was asking. I do believe she also still be sick. Yep. Yeah.
Yes, you're welcome. Right. Yep. Nice to see you all. Yeah. I like the way you. Yep. And what very much so our gas have crossed for a lot of years. I have you down in A plus. Thank you. I have instant dancing and talking. A plus. Now we can just start on the right.
That's right. Yeah.
Good job.
Good job, Mike. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
You can tell I'm not, Ian, for the students who introduce yourself, I'm not sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I wouldn't.
Yeah. That's why I was the principal.
Yes, sir. No,
You don't have that.
I know. I guess everyone knows, nice.
So it's unfortunate that people, for me.
I know. Yeah.
Yes. There's all those rates here.